The Galactic Council chamber fell silent as the emergency transmission crackled through their communication systems. Admiral Zephyr's mandibles clicked nervously as she processed the impossible data streaming across her screens. The peaceful trade route through the Kepler system had been disrupted by something unprecedented. Counselor Vex, she addressed the crystalline being floating near the central podium. The reconnaissance drones have returned with disturbing footage. The primitive species from the third planet has somehow achieved faster-than-light travel. A collective gasp rippled through the assembled delegates. The humans, as they called themselves, had been classified as a pre-warp civilization just 50 rotations ago. Their planet, designated as Earth in their crude language, was a hellish death world that no sane species would consider habitable. The radiation from their sun, the crushing gravity, the poisonous atmosphere filled with corrosive oxygen, and the extreme temperature variations should have kept any intelligent life trapped on its surface indefinitely. Counselor Vex's crystalline form pulsed with concern. "Show us the footage, Admiral." The chamber darkened as holographic displays materialized above their heads. The delegates watched in stunned silence as crude but functional spacecraft emerged from hyperspace near the outer rim of their territory. The ships were unlike anything in their databases, angular, aggressive, and covered in strange markings that seemed to serve no aesthetic purpose. "By the ancient void," whispered Commander Thrak, his four eyes widening in disbelief. "Those vessels appear to be constructed from refined metals. How do they manage to work with such dangerous materials?" Dr. Silena, the Council's chief xenobiologist, frantically consulted her data tablets. Her pale, elongated fingers trembled as she accessed the files on Earth. "According to our surveys, their homeworld has surface temperatures that regularly exceed the boiling point of most known liquids. The atmospheric pressure alone would crush any of our species instantly. The planet experiences regular seismic catastrophes, massive storms that could level entire cities, and radiation levels that would be lethal to civilized life." The footage continued, showing the human vessels maintaining perfect formation despite the chaotic gravitational fields near the gas giant. What disturbed the Council most was how comfortable these beings seemed in the vacuum of space, treating the deadly environment as casually as the Council species would treat a peaceful garden. "Admiral," Counselor Vex's voice carried an edge of fear. "What is their apparent destination?" Zephyr's screen flickered as she traced the projected trajectory. "They appear to be heading directly for the mining colony on Zirian Prime. The automated systems, they're not designed for contact with unknown species." The implications hit the chamber like a shockwave. Zirian Prime was home to over 2 million galactic citizens, all working in the comfortable, climate-controlled environments their species required. The mining operation extracted precious minerals from the planet's crust using delicate gravitational manipulation techniques that required absolute precision. "We must warn them immediately," declared Senator Krill, his tentacles writhing with agitation. "These Deathworlders might not understand our peaceful intentions. Their primitive nature could lead them to misinterpret our presence as hostile." But as Admiral Zephyr attempted to establish communication with Zirian Prime, the transmission channels filled with static. The human ships had somehow generated an electromagnetic interference pattern that disrupted their quantum communication networks. This was impossible. Such interference required technology far beyond what any pre-warp civilization should possess. "Counselor," Dr. Silena's voice was barely above a whisper, "I'm reading their biological scans from the reconnaissance data. These humans, they're not wearing environmental suits." The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. Every species in the galaxy required extensive life support systems to survive in space. The idea that any being could exist in a vacuum without protection was considered physically impossible. "That cannot be accurate," Commander Thrak insisted. "Run the scans again." The results remained unchanged. The human crew members aboard those ships were functioning in conditions that would kill any known form of life within seconds. Worse yet, they seemed to be thriving in what could only be described as a controlled hellscape. Admiral Zephyr's tactical analysis painted an even more disturbing picture. Counselors, their ships appear to be powered by controlled nuclear fusion. They're literally harnessing the power of stellar cores within their vessels. The silence that followed was deafening. Nuclear fusion was considered far too dangerous for use in spacecraft by any civilized species. The risk of catastrophic failure made it an unthinkable power source. Yet these humans had not only mastered it, but were using it as casually as other species use solar collectors. As the emergency session continued, more data poured in from their sensor networks. The human ships were not just surviving in space, they were adapting to it. Their vessels showed signs of modification and improvement even during flight, as if the crew were actively rebuilding their craft while traveling through the void. "We need to understand what we're dealing with," Counselor Vex declared, his crystalline form dimming with worry. "These Deathworlders represent something entirely outside our experience. Their very existence challenges everything we know about life in the universe." The Galactic Council had encountered thousands of species during their expansion across the stars. They had protocols for first contact, detailed procedures for peaceful integration, and extensive databases covering every conceivable form of alien life. But nothing in their vast knowledge base had prepared them for creatures who could thrive in conditions that would destroy any known form of life. Admiral Zephyr continued monitoring the human fleet as they approached the outer system. Their movements were precise, coordinated, and showed a level of technological sophistication that contradicted every assumption about Deathworld species. These weren't primitive beings stumbling through space. They were seasoned travelers who had somehow managed to not just survive, but excel in the most hostile environment imaginable. The Council faced a decision that would change the galaxy forever. They could attempt peaceful contact with these impossible beings, or they could try to contain what might be the most dangerous species ever encountered. But as they debated, one fact became increasingly clear. The universe had just become a much more unpredictable place. The humans were coming, and nothing would ever be the same. Colony Administrator Nexus floated nervously in his command center aboard Zirian Prime's orbital station. The facility's environmental systems hummed quietly, maintaining the perfect atmospheric conditions his species required: low oxygen, high humidity, and temperatures that would feel frigid to most life forms. The mining operation below ran like clockwork, with automated systems extracting valuable minerals from the planet's crust using precisely calibrated gravitational fields. Everything changed when the long-range sensors detected the approaching ships. "Sir," Chief Technician Vara reported, her multiple eyes focused intently on the scanning displays. "The unknown vessels are maintaining their approach vector. They'll reach our outer perimeter in approximately 6 standard hours." Nexus's elongated form rippled with anxiety. The Council's emergency transmission had been garbled by interference, but the message was clear enough. Unidentified ships from an unknown species were heading directly for their peaceful mining colony. His staff of 300 scientists and engineers had no experience with first contact protocols. They were miners and researchers, not diplomats or soldiers. "Have we managed to establish any form of communication?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Negative, sir. Their ships are generating some form of electromagnetic field that's interfering with our quantum communication arrays. We can't even send a simple greeting." Through the massive, transparent, aluminum viewing walls of the command center, Nexus could see the serene beauty of Zirian Prime below. The planet's purple atmosphere swirled peacefully, while their mining platforms dotted the surface like tiny jewels. It was a perfect example of Galactic Council engineering, efficient, clean, and completely harmonious with the local environment. The first sign that something was different came when the human ships entered the system's outer edge. Long-range sensors detected energy signatures unlike anything in their databases. The ships appeared to be running their engines at power levels that should have torn them apart, yet they maintained perfect stability. "Administrator," Vara's voice carried a note of confusion. "I'm reading massive thermal signatures from their vessels. The hull temperatures are— This can't be right." What are you seeing? Sir, their ship hulls are reading temperatures that would melt our strongest alloys. How are they maintaining structural integrity? Before Nexus could respond, the proximity alarms began sounding throughout the station. The human ships had accelerated far beyond what their initial scan suggested was possible. They were approaching the mining colony at speeds that should have been suicidal for any living crew. All stations, this is Administrator Nexus, he announced over the colony's communication system. We have unidentified visitors approaching our facility. All mining operations are to be suspended immediately. Secure all equipment and prepare for potential first contact scenarios. The response from his staff was immediate but confused. Mining Supervisor Keth's voice crackled through the comm system from the planet's surface. Sir, we're reading massive gravitational distortions from their approach. These ships are affecting local space-time in ways we've never seen. Our delicate extraction equipment is starting to fluctuate. This was exactly what Nexus had feared. The mining operation on Zirian Prime used incredibly sensitive gravitational manipulation technology. Even small disruptions could cause catastrophic failures that might damage the planet's ecosystem or endanger the lives of everyone on the surface. Evacuate all surface personnel to the emergency shelters, he ordered. Shut down all gravitational mining equipment immediately. But as the human ships drew closer, something unprecedented happened. Instead of the chaotic gravitational interference everyone expected, the space around the mining colony actually became more stable. The human vessels seemed to be somehow compensating for the disturbances they created, actively smoothing out the gravitational fields around the station. Sir, Vara reported with amazement in her voice, that they're actually improving our mining efficiency. The gravitational fields are more stable now than they've been in months. Nexus stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The approaching ships were not only avoiding damage to their operation, but were actually enhancing it. This level of technological sophistication was beyond anything the Council had encountered in centuries of exploration. The first visual contact came when a human fleet positioned themselves in orbit around Zirian Prime. Through the enhanced telescopes, the colony staff got their first look at the beings who had traveled from the death world called Earth. The ships themselves were marvels of engineering that challenged every assumption about spacecraft design. They appeared to be constructed from materials that could withstand temperatures and pressures that would destroy any known alloy. Strange protrusions and modifications covered their hulls, giving them an organic, almost living appearance. Administrator, came a new voice from the communication station. We're receiving a transmission. It's not coming through our quantum arrays. They're using some form of radio wave communication. Radio waves? Nexus was puzzled. That's an extremely primitive communication method. Why would they choose such an inefficient system? Unknown, sir. But the signal is incredibly strong and clear. They're transmitting in multiple frequencies simultaneously, and, sir, they seem to be attempting to learn our language in real time. The transmission that came through was unlike anything the Galactic Council had ever encountered. A deep, resonant voice spoke in perfect Council standard, despite the fact that no human should have been able to understand their language. Greetings to the inhabitants of this mining facility. This is Captain Sarah Chun of the Earth Exploration Vessel Endurance. We mean no harm to your operation or your people. We are explorers seeking peaceful contact with new civilizations. Nexus exchanged startled glances with his staff. Not only had the humans learned their language, but they had done so with a speed and accuracy that suggested incredible intellectual capabilities. Even the Council's most advanced translation algorithms required days of analysis to decode new languages. How do we respond? Vara asked nervously. Carefully, Nexus replied. He activated the communication system and spoke slowly and clearly. Welcome, travelers from Earth. This is Administrator Nexus of the Zirian Prime mining colony. We are peaceful researchers and miners under the authority of the Galactic Council. How may we assist you? The response came immediately, without any of the typical delays associated with translation. We appreciate your hospitality Administrator Nexus. We are conducting a survey of this sector, and we're curious about your mining operation. Our sensors indicate you're using gravitational manipulation technology. We'd be interested in observing your methods, if you're willing to share. The casual mention of gravitational manipulation technology sent shockwaves through the command center. Such technology was considered highly advanced even by council standards, yet these humans spoke of it as if it were commonplace. With respect, Nexus replied cautiously, our mining technology represents some of the most sophisticated engineering in the galaxy. It requires extensive training and delicate calibration. Perhaps we could start with a simple cultural exchange. Captain Chin's response carried what almost sounded like amusement. Of course, Administrator. We understand the need for caution. Perhaps you'd be interested in seeing some of our own mining techniques. We've developed methods for extracting resources from environments you might find challenging. Before Nexus could ask what she meant, the sensors detected something that made his entire staff freeze in shock. One of the human ships was descending directly toward Zirian Prime's surface, not to one of the prepared landing platforms with their carefully controlled atmospheric conditions, but toward the raw, unprotected surface of the planet itself. Sir, Vara whispered, they're going to land directly on the planet's surface. The atmosphere pressure down there would crush any of our species instantly. The chemical composition alone is toxic to every known form of life. Nexus watched in horrified fascination as the human vessel touched down on Zirian Prime's hostile surface as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Through their sensors, they could see figures emerging from the ship, figures that appeared to be wearing only minimal protective equipment, walking casually across terrain that would be lethal to any council species. The implications were staggering. These humans weren't just capable of surviving in space. They could apparently adapt to any environment, no matter how hostile. They were truly the ultimate survivors, beings for whom the very concept of an uninhabitable world seemed to have no meaning. As Administrator Nexus watched the humans begin their surface survey with equipment that seemed impossibly advanced, he realized that everything the Galaxy Council thought they knew about life, technology, and survival was about to change forever. Dr. Kira Volkov stepped out of the shuttle onto Zirian Prime's surface, breathing deeply through her basic atmospheric filter. The gravity was lighter than Earth's, making her feel almost bouncy as she surveyed the alien landscape. Purple storms swirled in the distance, and the air shimmered with chemical compounds that would be toxic to most galactic species. To her, it felt refreshingly mild compared to some of the environments she'd worked in back home. Atmospheric composition looks stable, she reported to Captain Shun through her comm unit. Oxygen levels are low, but manageable. Temperatures hovering around -40°C. Should be comfortable for extended operations. Through their shuttle's transparent aluminum viewports, the Galactic Council mining staff watched in stunned silence as the human survey team began their work. What they witnessed challenged every fundamental assumption about life and survival. Administrator Nexus observed from the orbital station, his hands trembling as he processed the impossible data streaming from their sensors. The humans were not just surviving on Zirian Prime's surface, they were thriving. Their equipment readings showed internal body temperatures that should have been fatal, radiation absorption levels that would kill any council species within minutes, and they were breathing an atmosphere that their computers classified as highly toxic. Sir, Chief Technician Vara reported, her voice filled with disbelief. They're not wearing full environmental suits. Those humans have minimal protection, yet they're functioning normally in conditions that would require our most advanced safety equipment. Dr. Volkov knelt beside one of the Council's gravitational mining extractors, examining the delicate machinery with professional interest. The device was a masterpiece of engineering, using precisely calibrated gravitational fields to extract minerals without disturbing the surrounding ecosystem. She pulled out a handheld scanner that looked deceptively simple compared to the Council's elaborate equipment. Interesting approach, she murmured, taking detailed readings. Very elegant use of gravitational harmonics. though I think we might be able to help you improve the efficiency. Mining Supervisor Keth, watching from his underground bunker, activated his communication system with shaking appendages. Administrator, did that human just suggest they could improve our extraction technology? That's impossible. Our gravitational manipulators represent centuries of council engineering advancement. What happened next would be talked about in council chambers for generations to come. Dr. Volkov opened a compact toolkit and began making what appeared to be minor adjustments to the mining equipment. Her modifications were so subtle that the monitoring systems barely registered them. Yet within minutes, the extraction rate doubled, then tripled, while actually reducing the environmental impact on the surrounding area. Ow! Was all Administrator Nexus could manage to say. Captain Chen's voice came through the communication system with what sounded like casual pride. Dr. Volkov has experience with gravitational engineering. She spent 3 years mining asteroids in the Kuiper Belt before joining our exploration program. The conditions there required some creative solutions. The council staff exchanged bewildered glances. Mining asteroids was considered a theoretical exercise by their best engineers. The gravitational fields involved were too complex, the environmental challenges too extreme. Yet these humans spoke of it as routine work experience. Captain Chun, Administrator Nexus, said carefully, "Perhaps you could tell us more about your mining operations? We're very interested in learning about Earth's approach to resource extraction." "Of course," Chun replied cheerfully. "Dr. Volkov, why don't you give our hosts a demonstration of standard Earth mining protocols?" What followed was a display that redefined the Council's understanding of what was possible. Dr. Volkov activated a device that looked like nothing more than a metallic cylinder. She pointed it at a rocky outcropping approximately 50 meters away, and the solid stones simply disintegrated, leaving behind perfectly sorted piles of pure minerals. "Molecular disassembly beam," she explained casually. "We use these for precision mining operations on gas giant moons. The hydrogen-rich atmospheres can be tricky to work in, so we develop tools that function reliably in extreme pressure environments." Supervisor Keth's voice was barely a whisper. She just vaporized solid rock with a handheld device. And she mentioned working on gas giant moons. The pressure on those worlds would crush our strongest spacecraft. But the demonstration wasn't over. Dr. Volkov activated another tool, this one resembling a simple metal rod. She touched it to the ground, and the rocky surface beneath her feet began to flow like liquid, reshaping itself into a perfectly smooth landing platform. "Matter reorganization field," she noted. "Useful for creating temporary infrastructure in hostile environments. We developed these for operations on volcanic worlds where the surface is constantly shifting." Administrator Nexus felt his worldview crumbling. Each casual mention of Earth's activities revealed operations in environments that the Council considered absolutely impossible to work in. Gas giant moons with crushing atmospheric pressure, volcanic worlds with temperatures that would melt their strongest materials, asteroid mining in the chaotic gravitational fields of stellar systems. "Dr. Volkov," he said, his voice barely steady, "what exactly do you consider a challenging working environment?" She paused in her work, seemingly considering the question seriously. "Well, there's the deep ocean mining operations back home. Working at the bottom of Earth's oceans requires dealing with pressure levels around 1,000 times your current atmospheric pressure here. The water is completely corrosive, and you have to work in absolute darkness while managing thermal vents that reach temperatures of over 400 degrees Celsius. Ocean mining, vora visperiet. They mine underwater, in pressurized liquid environments. Of course, Dr. Volkov continued, that's relatively easy compared to solar mining operations. Getting close enough to harvest materials from stellar coronas requires some specialized equipment, but the energy collection rates are excellent." The communication channels fell silent. The idea of mining operations conducted within a star's atmosphere was so far beyond the Council's technological capabilities that they didn't even have theoretical frameworks for such activities. Captain Chen's voice broke the stunned silence. Dr. Volkov tends to be modest about her accomplishments. She holds 17 patents for environmental adaptation technology and has worked in more hostile environments than any other member of our species. Would you like to see our standard survey probe in action? Before Administrator Nexus could respond, one of the human shuttles launched a small device towards Xerion Prime's upper atmosphere. The probe, no larger than a cargo container, began transmitting data that showed atmospheric composition, mineral distribution, and geological structure with a detail and accuracy that surpassed the Council's most sophisticated scanning systems. Your probe, Nexus said weakly, it appears to be functioning in atmospheric conditions that would destroy our equipment. Standard environmental tolerance, Captain Chen replied. Our survey equipment is designed to function in the atmosphere of Venus, so most planetary environments are relatively easy to work in. Dr. Volkov had moved on to examining the Council's power generation systems. Within minutes, she had somehow tripled their efficiency while reducing their energy signature to almost undetectable levels. Her modifications were so seamless that the existing systems didn't even register that they had been altered. Your fusion reactors are very well designed, she commented approvingly. Very similar to the backup generators we use in our residential districts. Have you considered transitioning to controlled singularity generators? They're much more efficient for large-scale operations. The mention of controlled singularity generators, theoretical constructs that the Council's best physicists considered impossible, was the final blow to Administrator Nexus's sense of reality. These humans were casually discussing technology that existed only in the Council's most advanced theoretical research, and they were talking about it as standard residential equipment. As Dr. Volkov continued her survey, it became increasingly clear that what the humans considered routine, everyday technology was centuries ahead of anything the Galactic Council had achieved. They weren't just survivors from a death world. They were the most technologically advanced species anyone had ever encountered, and they had developed their capabilities by thriving in environments that no other known form of life could even approach. The universe had suddenly become a much smaller and much more humbling place for the Galactic Council. Emergency klaxons echoed through the Galactic Council's primary chambers as delegates from across the galaxy gathered for the most important session in their recorded history. The data from Xerion Prime had sent shockwaves through every member civilization, challenging fundamental assumptions about technology, biology, and the very nature of advanced life in the universe. Counselor Vex's crystalline form pulsed with agitation as he addressed the assembly. Fellow delegates, we face an unprecedented situation. The humans have demonstrated technological capabilities that exceed our own by what appears to be several orders of magnitude. Admiral Zephyr stood at the tactical display, her mandibles clicking nervously as she presented the accumulated evidence. The holographic projections showed Dr. Volkov's casual modifications to Council mining equipment, the impossible environmental tolerances of the human crew, and the mind-bending demonstrations of their handheld technology. The implications are staggering, she reported to the stunned assembly. These beings are not simply advanced. They represent a completely different paradigm of technological development. Every piece of equipment they've shown us would require our entire civilization's combined resources to even attempt to replicate. Senator Krill's tentacles writhed with anxiety. How is such advancement possible? Our species have been developing technology for millennia. We've encountered thousands of civilizations, each contributing to our collective knowledge base. How could a single species, isolated on a death world, surpass all of our combined achievements? Dr. Silena, the Council's chief xenobiologist, had spent the past several cycles analyzing every scrap of data about Earth and its inhabitants. Her findings painted a picture that terrified and amazed the assembled delegates in equal measure. The answer appears to lie in their environment, she explained, her pale features reflecting the gravity of her discoveries. Earth is not simply a death world. It's a crucible of constant catastrophe that has forced its inhabitants to develop survival capabilities we can barely comprehend. The holographic display shifted to show Earth's characteristics. Massive gravitational variations, extreme temperature swings, frequent natural disasters, deadly radiation levels, and atmospheric conditions that would be lethal to most known life forms. But what emerged from Dr. Silena's analysis was far more disturbing. Their planet experiences what they call ice ages, periodic climate catastrophes that completely alter the global environment every few thousand years. Massive volcanic eruptions that would sterilize entire continents. Asteroid impacts that have repeatedly brought their world to the brink of total destruction. Commander Thrak leaned forward, his four eyes wide with disbelief. And their species survived these catastrophes? More than survived, Dr. Silena continued. They adapted, evolved, and ultimately thrived. Each catastrophe forced them to develop new technologies, new survival strategies, new ways of thinking about problems that would simply eliminate other species. The display showed examples of human adaptation that defied Council understanding. Cities built to withstand earthquakes that would level any Council structure. Transportation systems designed to function in atmospheric conditions that would be instantly fatal to most civilized species. Industrial processes that harnessed energy sources too dangerous for any rational species to attempt. They've been forced to develop technology that functions in the most extreme environments imaginable. Dr. Silena explained. What we consider impossible working conditions, deep ocean mining, volcanic surface operations, space-based construction, and radiation fields that would kill us instantly. These are routine challenges for human engineers. Admiral Zephyr activated another set of displays showing the human vessels in detail. Their spacecraft are designed using principles we've never encountered. The hull materials can withstand temperatures that would vaporize our strongest alloys. Their power systems generate energy levels that should tear their ships apart, yet they maintain perfect structural integrity. But how? Demanded Council of X. How does a species develop such capabilities in isolation? The answer came from an unexpected source. A new transmission had arrived from Captain Chun, and it contained an offer that left the Council speechless. Greetings, Counselor Vex. Chen's voice carried through the chamber's communication systems. We've been monitoring your emergency sessions through publicly available channels. We understand your confusion about our technological capabilities, and we'd like to offer an explanation. The Council chamber fell silent. The humans had been listening to their private deliberations, using technology that could somehow penetrate their most secure communication systems. The key to understanding human technology, Chen continued, lies in understanding human philosophy. We don't develop technology to make life easier. We develop it to survive the impossible. Every piece of equipment we create must function reliably in conditions that would destroy lesser alternatives. Captain Chen's transmission included detailed technical specifications that made the Council's top engineers stare in bewilderment. Handheld tools that generated more power than their largest reactors. Personal protective equipment that could withstand pressures and temperatures found only in stellar cores. Communication systems that functioned reliably across galactic distances without any supporting infrastructure. We'd be happy to share our knowledge with your civilizations, Chen offered. We believe that cooperation between species leads to better outcomes for everyone. But we should probably mention that our standard safety protocols might require some adjustments for non-human species. Dr. Silena accessed the detailed biological data that had been transmitted along with the technical specifications. What she found made her question everything she thought she knew about life and evolution. Counselors, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. According to this data, humans routinely survive radiation levels that would kill us in seconds. They function normally at temperatures that would flash freeze our bodily fluids. Their atmospheric tolerance range includes gas compositions that we would classify as industrial solvents. Are you saying they're naturally immune to conditions that would be instantly fatal to us? Senator Krill asked. More than immune, Dr. Silena replied. They seem to find such conditions merely inconvenient. Their standard environmental suits are designed to protect them from conditions that exist in the cores of gas giants. Their idea of a harsh environment involves pressures and temperatures that we can't even generate in our most advanced laboratories. The Council faced a dilemma unlike any in their history. The humans represented technological advancement beyond their wildest dreams, but they also represented a fundamental challenge to the Council's role as the galaxy's most advanced civilization. What are their intentions? Commander Thrak asked. Do they seek to conquer? To dominate? Admiral Zephyr reviewed the communication logs carefully. According to their transmissions, they're primarily interested in exploration and scientific advancement. They seem genuinely curious about other forms of life and eager to establish peaceful relationships. But their capabilities, Counselor Vex said slowly, they could eliminate any of our civilizations without effort. Their handheld tools alone could disable our most powerful defense systems. Captain Chen's voice returned to the communication system, as if she had been listening to their concerns. We understand your apprehension, counselors. We've encountered similar situations in our own history when technologically advanced cultures made contact with less developed societies. We've learned that the best approach is patience, respect, and gradual knowledge sharing. You've encountered this before? Vex asked. Of course, Chen replied. Earth has dozens of intelligent species, each with different technological capabilities and environmental adaptations. We've spent centuries learning how to coexist and collaborate despite vast differences in our abilities. The revelation hit the Council like a physical blow. Earth didn't just have one impossibly advanced species. It was home to multiple intelligent species, all coexisting on a single death world that should have been able to support none of them. As the emergency session continued, the Council members gradually realized they were facing a complete paradigm shift. The humans weren't just another species to be integrated into their galactic community. They represented an entirely new level of existence that would change everything about how the galaxy functioned. The question was no longer whether they could handle contact with the humans. The question was whether they were ready for the universe the humans would show them. 3 months after first contact, the Galactic Council's understanding of the universe had been fundamentally transformed. The joint research station established in neutral space between Earth territory and Council space hummed with activity that would have been considered impossible just a few cycles earlier. Admiral Zephyr floated in the station's main laboratory, watching human and Council scientists work together on projects that challenged the very foundations of physics. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, Earth's lead theoretical physicist, was explaining concepts to a group of Council researchers who hung on her every word despite the fact that most of her casual observations contradicted centuries of established scientific law. The key insight, Dr. Rodriguez explained, gesturing to a holographic display showing complex mathematical equations, is that what you call the laws of physics are actually more like guidelines. Under extreme conditions, the kind we deal with routinely on Earth, matter and energy behave in ways that your theoretical frameworks don't account for. Dr. Zenth, the Council's most respected physicist, studied the equations with multiple eyes that showed both fascination and confusion. But these calculations suggest that controlled black hole generation is not only possible, but relatively simple. Our best theories indicate that such processes would require energy levels equivalent to the output of entire star systems. That's because your theories assume normal environmental conditions, Rodriguez replied with a smile. When you're working in the crushing depths of Earth's oceans or in the plasma fields around our sun, the energy requirements become much more manageable. We've been using micro black holes for waste disposal in our ocean cities for over 50 years. The casual mention of cities existing in Earth's oceans sent another wave of disbelief through the Council scientists. According to their databases, Earth's oceans were crushing, corrosive environments filled with chemical compounds that would dissolve most known materials. The idea that humans had built entire civilizations in such conditions remained difficult to process. Administrator Nexus, who had been permanently assigned as the Council's liaison to the human delegation, found himself constantly amazed by the routine nature of what humans considered normal engineering challenges. He was currently observing Chief Engineer Marcus Webb demonstrate what Earth considered basic industrial equipment. This is a standard atmosphere processor, Webb explained, activating a device roughly the size of a cargo container. We use these to transform planetary atmospheres into more comfortable breathing environments. This particular model can process about 50 million cubic kilometers of atmosphere per day. 50 million cubic kilometers? Nexus repeated weakly. Per day. Yeah, it's one of our smaller units, Webb replied casually. The industrial-scale processors we use for terraforming operations can handle entire planetary atmospheres in about a month. Though to be honest, most of us prefer to just adapt to local conditions rather than bother with terraforming. It's usually easier. The terraforming technology alone represented capabilities that the Council had only dreamed of achieving. The fact that humans considered it routine maintenance equipment was a constant source of amazement and humility for the Council delegates. Captain Chun had become something of a celebrity among Council species, though she seemed genuinely puzzled by the attention. She was currently addressing a gathering of Council military leaders who were trying to understand human approaches to conflict resolution. The thing you have to understand, she explained to the assembled officers, is that humans don't really think of warfare the way most species do. When your entire planet is actively trying to kill you every day, interpersonal conflicts seem relatively minor by comparison. General Thax, the Council's supreme military commander, leaned forward with interest. How does your species handle territorial disputes or resource conflicts? Mostly through engineering solutions, Chun replied. If two groups want the same resources, we find ways to create more resources. If they want the same territory, we help them expand into previously uninhabitable areas. It's usually much more efficient than fighting. But what if one group actively attacks another? General Thax pressed. Chen's expression grew more serious. That's incredibly rare, but when it happens, the response is usually swift and decisive. A species that survives on a death world by necessity becomes very good at eliminating threats quickly and efficiently. But we prefer to avoid such situations entirely. The military implications were staggering. A species capable of thriving in environments that would kill any council member in seconds would naturally develop military capabilities far beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. The fact that they preferred peaceful solutions made them allies worth having. But the alternative was too terrifying to contemplate. In the station's diplomatic quarters, Counselor Vex was engaged in what had become a regular series of philosophical discussions with Professor Sarah Kim, Earth's chief cultural anthropologist. These conversations had revealed aspects of human civilization that were perhaps even more remarkable than their technological achievements. What I find most fascinating, Professor Kim was saying, is how your species developed such remarkably stable, peaceful societies despite having such comfortable living conditions. Earth's hostile environment forced us to develop strong cooperative instincts early in our evolution. Competition between humans was usually secondary to the much more pressing challenge of surviving our planet. You're suggesting that your environmental challenges actually promoted peaceful coexistence? Vex asked, his crystalline form pulsing with interest. Exactly. When your survival depends on everyone working together against constant external threats, internal conflicts become luxuries you can't afford. Human cultures that developed strong cooperative structures were the ones that survived to spread their values. This perspective had provided entirely new insights into galactic sociology. Most council species had evolved on relatively peaceful worlds where competition between individuals was often the primary evolutionary pressure. The idea that extreme environmental challenges could actually promote cooperation rather than conflict represented a fundamental shift in understanding social development. Dr. Rodriguez returned to the laboratory where she had been working on what she described as basic improvements to council technology. Her modifications to their faster-than-light communication systems had increased their range and efficiency by several orders of magnitude, while simultaneously reducing their power requirements. The problem with your quantum entanglement arrays, she explained to a group of fascinated council engineers, is that you're only using three-dimensional space for your transmission protocols. When you incorporate folded space-time geometries, what we call hyperspace tunneling, you can establish communication links that function reliably across galactic distances with virtually no signal degradation. The Council engineers nodded politely, though their expressions suggested they understood perhaps 1 word in 10 of Rodriguez's explanation. The gap between human and Council physics wasn't just technological, it was conceptual. Humans routinely worked with principles that Council science considered purely theoretical. As the months passed, other aspects of human civilization became apparent that were equally remarkable. Earth's population, it turned out, was vastly larger than any Council world could support. Over 200 billion humans lived and worked across their planet's surface, oceans, underground cities, and orbital habitats, all thriving in environments that would be instantly lethal to most galactic species. Their economic systems were based on principles of abundance rather than scarcity, since human technology had made most traditional resource limitations irrelevant. Energy was freely available from controlled fusion, controlled antimatter reactions, and direct stellar collection. Materials could be synthesized at the atomic level or harvested from environments no other species could access. Perhaps most importantly, human culture had developed strong ethical frameworks for dealing with less technologically advanced species. Their own planet's history included numerous examples of contact between societies with different technological capabilities, and they had learned through experience the importance of gradual, respectful integration. "We've made mistakes," Captain Chen admitted during one of the regular diplomatic briefings. In our early history, contact between human cultures with different technological levels sometimes led to exploitation or cultural destruction. We've spent centuries developing better approaches to cross-cultural contact. The result was a species that possessed almost godlike technological capabilities, but had coupled them with sophisticated ethical systems designed to prevent abuse of their power. They genuinely seemed interested in helping other species advance rather than dominating them. As the Joint Research Station continued its work, it became clear that the galaxy was entering a new era. Human technology would revolutionize everything from medicine to manufacturing, transportation to terraforming. But perhaps more importantly, human perspectives on cooperation, problem-solving, and interspecies relations would provide new models for galactic civilization. The Council had been unprepared for contact with the Deathworlders, but they were rapidly discovering that the universe was far more wonderful and full of possibilities than they had ever imagined. The humans had not come as conquerors or exploiters, but as teachers and partners in exploring the infinite potential of the cosmos. The future, it seemed, was going to be far more interesting than anyone had dared to hope.